70 hours of overtime a month, and he still thinks the money's going to your business?
Every single check. He hasn't questioned $1.
And he doesn't know about us?
Baby, he doesn't have the energy to know. He comes home at 10, eats out of a container, and passes out.
Pour me another glass of that Bordeaux.
He bought that on our anniversary trip. Said he was saving it for something worth it.
Guess he was.
Andre Whitfield was 34 years old when he started working 70 hours of overtime a month, and he never once complained. Every double shift, every missed dinner, every exhausted Sunday, he told himself it was for Danielle, for the business she swore was about to take off. He trusted her completely. That Tuesday, a scheduling error sent him home 4 hours early. He imagined surprising her. Instead, he parked across the street and stared through his own living room window at a man who moved through his house like he belonged there. Barefoot, familiar, pouring wine from a bottle Andre recognized from their anniversary trip. An overnight bag sat by the door. Danielle was laughing, the same laugh she gave him after his 16-hour shifts. Andre didn't move, didn't knock, didn't confront. He sat there, calculating, while the two of them lived comfortably inside a life his overtime checks had paid for. And in that 10-minute silence outside his own front door, Andre made a decision neither of them would see coming. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The warehouse never slept. That was the first thing Andre Whitfield had learned when he took the supervisor position 3 years ago. And it was still true at 5:47 on a Tuesday morning. The loading docks were already humming. Forklifts beeped and reversed in the pale fluorescent light. The smell of diesel and cold concrete hung in the air like it lived there. Andre clocked in, snapped his hard hat into place, and got to work. He hadn't slept much. 4 hours, maybe a little less. He'd waited up for Danielle until past midnight, and she hadn't come home until after 1. "A client dinner," she'd said, dropping her bag by the door and heading straight to the bathroom. She hadn't looked at him when she said it. He'd asked which client. She'd said the name like she was reading it off a wall, Simmons & Co-ons. Then turned on the shower. He hadn't pushed. That wasn't his style. By 7 in the morning, Andre had already walked the full length of the East Dock twice, signed off on 3 departure manifests, and caught a problem that nobody else had touched. It was a pallet of industrial parts headed for a distribution center in Memphis. On paper it looked fine. Right weight, right count, right labels. But Andre had noticed the load number didn't match the routing code on the manifest. A single digit off. Easy to miss. The kind of thing that could send a $40,000 shipment to the wrong city and cost the company a 2-day delay and a very angry client. He flagged it before the truck left the dock. "How'd you even catch that?" said Marcus, one of the newer floor workers, squinting at the paperwork. "I read it," Andre said simply. Marcus laughed like it was a joke. It wasn't. That was what Andre did. He read everything. He paid attention to everything. While other supervisors managed from their desks, Andre walked. He watched. He knew every worker's name, every truck's schedule, every number that was supposed to match something else. His floor ran clean because he made it run clean. His manager, Mr. Braddock, had told him once, "You see things other people walk right past, Andre? That's rare." Andre had nodded and gone back to work. That was just who he was. At his lunch break, he sat in his truck with a Tupperware container of leftover rice and chicken that he'd packed himself. Danielle had been asleep when he left. The kitchen had been dark. He ate and scrolled through his phone. There was a notification from their joint bank account, an automatic alert he'd set up months ago. A $340 withdrawal from a vendor he didn't recognize. He stared at it for a second, then set his phone face down on the seat. He'd ask her about it tonight. He always asked. She always had an explanation. Supplies for an event, a deposit on a venue, software for the business. The business that was always one good season away from turning a corner. He believed in that corner. He had to. He was the one funding the road that led to it. 3 years of overtime had paid for Danielle's event planning dream. The website, the equipment, the marketing, the networking dinners that sometimes ran until 1 in the morning. He didn't complain. That wasn't who he was either. You supported the person you loved. You carried the weight when they needed you to. His phone buzzed. Keisha. He answered on the second ring. "You at work?" his sister asked. "On lunch?" A pause. Keisha's pauses always meant something. "You sound tired." "I'm fine." "Andre, when's the last time you were home before 9 o'clock at night?" He thought about it. "I'm home by 9 most nights." "Baby, I'm a paralegal. Don't try to argue facts with me." Her voice was dry but warm. "I'm just saying, you're grinding yourself down to nothing. You eating?" "I'm eating right now." "What?" "Rice and chicken." "Out of that little container you pack yourself, because your wife doesn't—" She stopped. "Never mind. Say what you were going to say, Keisha." "I was just going to say that you deserve someone who shows up for you the way you show up for everybody else." Her voice had gone softer. "That's all?" "Danielle shows up," he said. "She's building something. That takes time." Keisha was quiet for a moment. "Okay, Andre." "I mean it. She works hard." I said okay. But the way she said it sat with him for the rest of his break. Flat and careful, the way people talked when they'd already decided not to argue anymore. He was back on the floor by 2:30 in the afternoon, moving through the afternoon manifests, when his shift coordinator, Luis, caught him near the south dock. "Hey, Whitfield, word came down from scheduling." Luis held up a clipboard, almost apologetic. "Your overtime tonight got pulled. Somebody double-booked the shift. You're good to go at 2. Andre looked at him. 2 o'clock? "Yeah, man. Go home early for once." Luis grinned. "Must be your lucky day." Andre nodded slowly. He picked up his clipboard. He finished his notes. Then he walked to his locker, changed out of his work boots, and headed for his truck. The drive home usually took 25 minutes. Today, it took 22. No traffic. Green lights. The kind of afternoon that felt like a gift. Andre had his window cracked, one hand on the wheel, already thinking about a hot shower and maybe a real meal for once. Something cooked on the stove, not eaten out of a container in a parking lot. He was almost smiling when he turned onto Clearwater Drive. Almost. The car stopped him first, a dark gray Infiniti, parked in his driveway. Nose pointed out, like whoever drove it, was comfortable enough not to worry about a quick exit. Andre didn't recognize it. He knew every car on this block. The Pattersons' minivan, the old Buick the kid on the corner was always working on, his neighbor Dale's truck. He knew them all. This wasn't any of them. He didn't pull in. He didn't know exactly why. Some instinct, quiet and cold, told his hands to turn the wheel before his brain had finished the thought. He eased the truck to the curb on the opposite side of the street, about 3 houses down, and cut the engine. He sat. His hands stayed on the wheel for a moment. Then he let them drop. The house looked normal from the outside. Curtains drawn most of the way. Front door closed. His azalea bushes, the ones he'd planted along the front walkway 2 springs ago, were still blooming pink along the edge of the porch. Normal, quiet. Then the screen door swung open. A man stepped out onto the porch. Andre didn't know his face, not yet, but he knew what he was looking at. The man was tall, broad across the shoulders, wearing just a pair of dark joggers and nothing else. His chest was bare. He moved easy, relaxed, one hand wrapped around a glass of something red. He leaned against the porch rail and looked out at the street, the way a man looks out at something that belongs to him. Like he was home. Andre's jaw tightened. He didn't move. The man turned his head and said something back through the screen door. Then he laughed, deep and easy, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Andre heard it through the cracked window, and then he heard Danielle laugh back. He knew her laugh. He'd loved her laugh. Bright and a little too loud, the kind that surprised her sometimes, where she'd cover her mouth right after like she hadn't meant to let it out that big. That was the laugh. His laugh. The one from their kitchen, their couch, their life. Coming through the screen door of his house, meant for a man he'd never seen before. Andre looked down at the steering wheel. His knuckles were white. He didn't know when that had happened. He made himself breathe. In, out, slow. Don't move. Just watch. He looked back up. Through the gap in the curtains he could see into the living room. Danielle was in there, in a light blue dress he recognized, the one she wore on weekends when she wasn't going anywhere, when it was just the two of them being easy with each other. She was moving through the living room, and the man, whoever he was, had stepped back inside. He crossed behind her and touched the middle of her back. Not a brush, a rest. A hand placed with memory in it. Andre's chest went tight and hollow at the same time. He forced his eyes to move, to catalog. The overnight bag was by the door. Small, soft-sided, dark olive green. Not his. He'd never seen it before. It was zipped halfway, and something pale, a shirt or a blouse, was folded over the top of it. The wine bottle on the end table inside, visible through the curtain gap, he recognized it. Bordeaux. Chateau something. He'd bought it in Savannah 2 summers ago. Their 3rd anniversary trip. He'd carried it back in his luggage, wrapped in a sweater so it wouldn't break. He'd been saving it for something, he said. Something worth it. There it was, opened, half gone, being poured into a glass that wasn't his. Andre sat in that car for 10 minutes. He counted them. Not because he was calm, because he was making himself be. He catalogued everything he could see. The way the man moved inside the house, unhurried, familiar with the layout. He didn't pause at thresholds, didn't look around. He knew where the kitchen was, where the couch was, probably where the bathroom was, and which drawer the takeout menus lived in. This wasn't a first visit. Not even close. The question wasn't what was happening. That was plain enough. The question, the one that settled into Andre's chest like something cold and heavy, was how long? How long had this been a thing? How many nights had he been on the loading dock, reading manifests and catching other people's mistakes, while this man drank his wine in his living room and laughed with his wife? He needed to know. Not a guess, not a suspicion, facts, dates, evidence. He reached down and started the engine. Then he pulled away from the curb, slow and even, and drove back the way he came. Andre pulled into the driveway at 9:58 p.m. 2 minutes early. He sat in the truck for a moment, hands loose on the wheel, and looked at the house. The porch light was on. Warm yellow glow. The kind of thing that's supposed to mean someone's waiting for you. He grabbed his lunch bag and went inside. Danielle was on the couch when he came through the door, legs tucked under her, a reality show playing low on the TV. She looked up and smiled. "Hey, baby, you eat?" "Grab something at the dock," he said. He set his bag down by the door and rolled his shoulders like a man who'd been on his feet all day. Because he had been. That part wasn't a lie. "Long one. Come sit down." He did. He sat beside her, and she leaned into him, and he put his arm around her the way he always did, and the TV played, and the house was quiet. She smelled like that lotion she kept on the bathroom counter. Lavender. He'd bought her the first bottle. His face didn't change. "Tired," he said. "I know." She patted his knee. "Get some sleep." He nodded. Inside he was perfectly still, like water with no wind on it. The next morning, Saturday, Andre told Danielle he'd picked up a rare weekend shift. A last-minute thing, he said. Braddock needed someone he could trust to oversee a special inventory count. "On a Saturday?" she said, from the bathroom doorway, working product into her hair. "You know how it is," he said. He was lacing his boots at the foot of the bed, not looking up. "Won't be the whole day. Back by 4, maybe 5. "Okay," she said. Easy, no hesitation. He noticed that, the ease of it. He kissed her on the cheek, grabbed his keys, and left. He drove to a shopping plaza about 1.5 miles away and parked facing a sporting goods store he had no intention of entering. He ordered a coffee from a drive-through app on his personal phone, the one Danielle never touched. His work phone, the one that sat charging on the nightstand at home, the one she'd seen him leave behind on accident a dozen times, had a location-sharing app open on it, the kind that ran quietly in the background. He watched the dot on his screen. It stayed still for 41 minutes. Then it moved. Not far. 3 miles, roughly. Andre pulled up the satellite map and studied the destination. A residential address, 2 neighborhoods over, a street he didn't know. He drove past it once. The dark gray Infiniti was in the driveway. Andre drove back to the plaza. He sat in the parking lot, finished his coffee, and watched the dot for another hour. It didn't move again. He drove home at 4:30 and made a point of washing grease off his hands at the kitchen sink, even though there was no grease on them. Danielle asked how it went. He said fine. He asked about her day. "Just ran some errands," she said. "Nothing exciting." "Good," he said. He dried his hands. "Good." He waited until she was asleep before he opened the laptop. He'd never been the one to manage the finances. That had been their arrangement, comfortable and unexamined. Danielle handled the household accounts, he handled the overtime checks, and somehow there was always just enough. He'd trusted that without ever really looking at the numbers. He looked now. He had to reset a password to get back into the joint account portal. It took him 12 minutes. When the statements loaded, he started from the top and worked backward, month by month, quiet at the kitchen table with the range light on low. The first transfer he flagged was dated 14 months ago. $1,200, labeled Event Coordination, V Consulting Group. He didn't recognize the name. He wrote it down. He found another one the following month, $1,500, then $1,600, then, for 3 consecutive months, $2,000 even, clean and automatic, hitting on the same date each cycle like a subscription. He pulled up a search on his phone, V Consulting Group. The results were thin, a sparse website, barely built out, a contact form with no address listed. One name in the footer, small, almost like an afterthought. Preston L. Vaughn, Principal Consultant. Andre leaned back in his chair. He looked at the ceiling for a moment. Then he looked back at the screen. He did the math in his head. 14 months at an average of $1,600 a month. He'd need the full statements to know the real total. But even the rough number sat in his stomach like a stone. His overtime money, his double shifts, his 60 and 70-hour months, the ones he'd worked so Danielle's business could get its footing. Financing this. He closed the laptop. He sat in the dark for a while. Then he picked up his phone and called Keisha. She answered on the second ring, which meant she'd been awake. His sister was always awake too late. He could hear the quiet of her apartment behind her voice. "Andre?" A pause. "It's almost midnight." "I know," he said. "I need to ask you something. It's not a feelings conversation. I need to know how to build a case." A beat of silence. "Talk to me," she said. He did, flat and even, start to finish, no theatrics. The car in the driveway, the tracking app, the account, the name. When he finished, Keisha was quiet for a moment. "Okay," she said. "First thing, don't touch anything else tonight. Don't move money, don't confront her, don't change a single thing in that house." "I know." "Document everything," she said. "Screenshots, statements, dates. You write down what you saw with your own eyes and you date it. Every single thing." Her voice was steady and professional, the paralegal coming through. "And you reveal nothing. You understand me? Nothing. Not a word, not a look, not a question that sounds like a question." "Yeah," he said. "I understand." "I'll make some calls Monday," she said. "Andre, I'm good," he said. "I just needed to know how to do this right." She exhaled slowly. "We're going to do it right," she said. "I promise you that." He nodded, even though she couldn't see him. "Get some sleep," she said. "I will." He hung up. He set the phone down on the table. Outside, the neighborhood was dark and still. A dog barked somewhere, 2 streets over, and then stopped. Andre sat with his hands flat on the table, patient, quiet, already planning. The diner on Clement Street opened at 6. Andre was there at 6:05, already in a corner booth with his back to the wall. He'd ordered coffee and a water. The place smelled like bacon grease and dish soap, and the morning light came through the windows in long, flat bars that cut across the laminate tables. It was the kind of diner that never really changed. Same cracked vinyl seats, same handwritten specials on a whiteboard by the register. Keisha walked in at 6:12, still pulling her coat straight. She slid into the booth across from him and looked at his face the way she always did, like she was reading fine print. "You sleep?" she asked. "Some." She picked up the laminated menu, glanced at it once, and set it back down. "Tell me what you have. Exactly." Andre pulled a folded piece of notebook paper from his chest pocket and smoothed it out on the table. He'd written everything down the night before. Clean columns, dates, amounts, labels. His handwriting was small and precise. Keisha studied it without touching it. 14 months of transfers, she said. "That's just what I found in the joint account," Andre said. "I don't know how far back the business account goes. I can't access that one." "You don't need to." She tapped the edge of the paper. "What you have here is already a pattern. Courts like patterns." She paused. "You said the company name in the footer was V Consulting Group?" "Preston L. Vaughn, Principal Consultant." She nodded slowly. "Okay, first thing we do is pull full statements. Every month you can get. Print them. Don't just screenshot. Printed statements carry more weight if this goes where I think it might go." She folded her hands on the table. "Second thing, do you still have access to that family iCloud account? The one you and Danielle both linked when you got married?" Andre thought for a second. "She never asked me to log out." "People forget about those," Keisha said. There was no satisfaction in her voice, just the flat clarity of someone who'd seen this before. "Check it when you get home tonight. Quietly. See what's synced." He checked it that night, after Danielle fell asleep. He sat in the truck in the driveway with the engine off, screen brightness turned down low. He logged into the iCloud portal on his personal phone and held his breath. Her photo library was there, her messages, all of it, sitting open and unguarded, like a door she'd simply forgotten to lock. He started with the messages. The thread with Preston went back 2 years and 9 months. Andre sat very still. 2 years and 9 months. He did the math without wanting to. That put the start of it just 3 months after he'd taken on the first set of overtime shifts. The shifts he'd taken specifically so Danielle's business could breathe. He thought about that for a moment. The version of himself from nearly 3 years ago, proud and purposeful, picking up extra hours for her. He kept reading. The texts were not hard to understand. They were detailed enough that there was no other way to read them. But what caught Andre's attention more than the personal messages was a thread from about 18 months back. A long back and forth about something Danielle called the account situation. Preston's responses were impatient and directing. He told her which transfers to label as vendor payments. He told her what amounts to move and when. Danielle followed every instruction. Andre went to the photo library next. There were pictures he'd never seen. Restaurant dinners. A weekend trip somewhere with a coastline. Preston asleep in what looked like a hotel room, sunlight coming through white curtains. He recognized the sheets in one photo. They were from his own bedroom. He put the phone face down on the passenger seat and stared through the windshield for a long minute. The neighborhood was dark. A sprinkler clicked on somewhere across the street, and he listened to it tick through its cycle. Then he picked the phone back up and kept working. By Thursday, they had a folder. Keisha had built it with the precision she brought to everything at the law office. Bank statements going back 16 months, printed and tabbed. Screenshots of the iCloud texts, dated and organized by subject. A timeline she'd typed up herself, single-spaced, that laid out the full arc of what had been happening. She slid a copy across her kitchen table for Andre to review. He read it without speaking. All of it. When he got to the end, he turned back to the financial section and read it again. The business, he said. Did she ever have real clients? Keisha shook her head once. Not one I can find. No reviews. No vendor contracts. No event permits pulled in her name. She leaned forward. It was never a business, Andre. It was a front. He set the papers down. Every dollar of overtime, he said. It wasn't a question. We can prove at least 22,000 routed directly to Preston's company, she said. There could be more. Andre nodded. He picked the folder up, squared the edges against the table, and slid it back into the envelope. I need this to be airtight, he said. It's not there yet, Keisha said, but it's close. Timing matters. You don't move until I say it's ready. I know. She looked at him carefully. How are you holding up at home? Fine, he said. Normal. She studied him for a second longer, then nodded. He kept the envelope in his gym locker at work, behind a spare set of boots and a padlock only he had the combination to. He told no one. Not a co-worker, not a friend. Just Keisha. That evening, he came home at his usual time, hung his keys on the hook by the door, and washed his hands at the kitchen sink. Danielle had made pasta. The kitchen smelled warm and good. She handed him a bowl and asked about his day, and he told her it was fine. Just inventory. Nothing exciting. She smiled and turned back to the stove. He sat down at the table and ate his dinner. The announcement came on a Tuesday night. Danielle brought it up the way she always brought up business things, casually, almost as an afterthought, like it was barely worth mentioning. She was clearing the dinner plates when she said it. There's a networking retreat next weekend, down in Savannah. She stacked the plates without looking up. It's a big deal for event planners. The right people will be there. Andre wrapped his hands around his coffee mug. How long? 4 days, Thursday to Sunday. She finally looked at him. Her expression was warm and open, the same expression she'd worn for 6 years. I know the timing's not great. Don't worry about it, he said. Go do your thing. She smiled, soft and grateful, and touched his arm as she passed. I was actually going to ask if you could pick up some extra hours that week, just to cover the hotel and registration fees. The conference isn't cheap. Sure, he said. You're the best. She kissed his cheek and disappeared toward the hallway. He sat there, holding his mug. Conference fees. He checked the account the next morning from his truck before his shift. It didn't take long. The confirmation was already there in the transaction history, a charge from the night before. A boutique hotel in Savannah, 2 nights on a double occupancy rate. The booking name wasn't a conference center. It was a hotel he could Google in 30 seconds, the kind of place with a rooftop bar and a spa menu. He looked at the dollar amount. Then he looked at how many overtime hours it took him to earn that amount. He put the phone in his pocket and went to work. Something had shifted in Danielle over the past 2 weeks, and Andre had been watching it. She was lighter, looser. She laughed more easily, moved through the house with a kind of ease he hadn't seen in a long time. She stopped being careful. She'd leave her phone on the counter. She'd hum to herself in the kitchen. She'd started suggesting weekend plans, asking about his schedule, touching his shoulder when she passed him. The attention felt new, and because he understood her better now than he ever had, he understood exactly what the attention meant. She thought she had it figured out. She thought she was in control. That confidence was what made him uneasy. He drove out to Ruth's house on Saturday morning, the week before the trip. He'd called ahead and kept it simple, told her he was in the area and wanted to drop off the leftovers Danielle had packed for her. A container of rice and stew that had been sitting in their fridge for 3 days. Ruth had sounded pleased on the phone. She always was when Andre called. Her house was a small brick split level in a quiet part of town, with rose bushes along the front walk that she'd been tending for 20 years. She answered the door in a house dress and reading glasses, and she hugged him the way she always did, both hands, firm, like she meant it. He sat at her kitchen table while she made tea. The house was clean and still. A television murmured in the back room. There were photos on the wall above the doorway. Danielle as a teenager, a school portrait, a family Christmas from a long time ago. He watched Ruth move around the kitchen. She wasn't quite herself. He could see it. She was a little too deliberate with the mugs, a little too focused on the tea bags, the way people get when they're using small tasks to avoid eye contact. He waited until she sat down. "Ruth," he said gently, "is everything okay with you?" She looked at him over her mug. Her eyes went soft for just a second. "I'm fine, baby." "You seem like something's on your mind." She wrapped both hands around her mug and looked down at the table. A long pause. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a car passed slowly. Then she pressed her lips together and shook her head, and when she looked back up, her eyes were wet. "Andre." Her voice came out thin. I haven't known what to do." He kept his voice calm, even. "What do you mean?" What came out of her was halting and broken, the confession of a woman who had been carrying something too heavy for too long. She'd known about Preston for months. She'd told Danielle it was wrong. Danielle hadn't listened. Ruth had convinced herself it would end on its own, that Danielle would come to her senses. Then, about 6 weeks ago, Danielle had said something that Ruth couldn't stop thinking about. She said they were talking about the future. Ruth's voice dropped. Her and that man. She said once things were settled. Once she had enough from the divorce to get them started. She stopped, drew a breath. "She mentioned your retirement account and the money your father left you." Andre didn't move. "She already talked to somebody," Ruth said. "A lawyer. She told me she wasn't leaving empty-handed." The kitchen was very quiet. Andre reached across the table and covered Ruth's hand with his. "Thank you for telling me," he said. His voice was steady. "I mean that." He stayed another 20 minutes. He finished his tea. He asked about her rose bushes. Then he hugged her at the door, walked to his car, and sat behind the wheel without starting the engine. He picked up his phone and called Keisha. She answered on the second ring. "The stakes just changed," he said. "This isn't just about the affair anymore. She's been planning to take the 401k, my father's inheritance. She's already got a lawyer." Silence on the other end. Then Keisha's voice, sharp and clear. "Don't move. Don't say a word to her. I'll call you tomorrow morning." "I know," Andre said. He set the phone on the passenger seat and looked out at Ruth's rose bushes, pink and full along the front walk, nodding gently in the morning breeze. Andre sent the meeting request on a Monday morning. He kept it short. Scheduling matter. 15 minutes if you have it. Braddock's assistant confirmed by noon. 2 o'clock, corner office, 3rd floor. Andre spent the rest of his shift the way he always did, checking manifests, flagging a misrouted pallet out of the Memphis line, running the afternoon cycle count with his crew. Nobody watching him would have seen anything different. That was the point. At 1:55, he took the stairs. Braddock's office smelled like coffee and old paper. It was a real working office, stacks of binders on the credenza, a whiteboard covered in route numbers, framed photos of the warehouse floor from 20 years back, when the company was still running half the dock space. Braddock had been with the company longer than Andre had been alive, and it showed in the way he occupied the room. Completely comfortable. Completely in charge. He was a big man, broad-shouldered, with a gray close-cut and reading glasses he wore low on his nose. He waved Andre into the chair across from his desk without looking up from whatever he was reading. "Sit down, Whitfield. 2 seconds." Andre sat. He set his hands in his lap and waited. Braddock set the paper down and pulled his glasses off. "Scheduling thing?" "Yes, sir." Andre nodded. "I wanted to talk about the Tuesday rotation. We've got a gap in the dock lead coverage 3rd shift, and I had a solution I wanted to run by you before I put it in the system." Braddock listened. They talked through the rotation for about 5 minutes. It was a real issue, and Andre had a real solution. That was important. Everything had to be real. When there was a natural pause, Andre leaned back slightly and let his expression go casual. "Actually, while I've got you, something kind of odd came up last week. I don't know if it's anything." Braddock tilted his head. "Talk." "One of my guys mentioned hearing about some outside consultant making the rounds, pitching a freight contract, something to do with our southern corridor routes." Andre kept his tone light, almost offhand. "I didn't think much of it at first, but some of what he described was pretty specific. Route structures, volume thresholds, things I wouldn't expect somebody on the outside to know that well." Braddock's expression didn't change, but his eyes sharpened. "Specific how?" he said. "Specific enough that it caught my attention." Andre shrugged. "Probably nothing. Just felt like the kind of thing worth mentioning." Braddock looked at him for a long moment. "You got a name?" "My guy thought he heard Vaughn. Preston Vaughn, maybe. Said he called himself an independent logistics consultant." Braddock wrote it down on the pad beside his keyboard. Just like that. 2 words, no drama. But Andre had worked under this man for 4 years. He knew what that stillness meant. It meant something had already been bothering Braddock, and Andre had just given it a name. "I'll look into it," Braddock said. "You did right bringing it to me." "Yes, sir," he found out 3 days later. Braddock called him back up on a Thursday afternoon. No meeting request this time, just a knock on Andre's office window and a wave. Andre followed him upstairs and sat in the same chair. Braddock sat down, put his glasses on the desk, and folded his hands. "That name you gave me," he said. "Preston Vaughn." "Yes, sir?" "Our compliance team pulled the inquiry records. He pitched 2 members of our procurement board last month. Independent consultation on a Southern Corridor restructure." Braddock paused. The proposal included specific data, internal data, load capacity numbers, carrier rate benchmarks, shift overlap schedules. He looked at Andre directly. "That is not public information, Whitfield." Andre held his expression steady. "No, sir, it's not. Somebody gave it to him." Braddock's voice was flat and certain. "We don't know how yet, but we will." "That's a serious problem," Andre said. "It is." Braddock studied him for a moment. "You sure you only heard about this secondhand? From your crew?" "That's all I know," Andre said. "I just knew it sounded wrong." Braddock nodded slowly, the way a man nods when he's decided something. "I've already put it in the hands of our legal team. Vaughn won't get anywhere near another contract in this region, not once we're done." "Understood," Andre said. He kept his voice even. He kept his face calm. But underneath all of it, something locked into place, clean and final, like a bolt sliding home. Preston Vaughn had walked into Andre's own house, slept in Andre's own bed, eaten food bought with Andre's own money. And then he'd taken what Danielle had overheard at their dinner table, route numbers, operational details, things Andre had mentioned without thinking, and tried to build a business with it. Tried to make himself look like something real. Andre stood when Braddock did. They shook hands. He took the stairs back down and walked through the warehouse floor, past the dock doors and the stacked pallets and the hum of the conveyor lines, all the way to the far end of the parking lot, where it was quiet. He took out his phone and pulled up his attorney's number. The attorney's name was Carol Sims. Keisha had worked with her on 2 cases the previous year. "She's quiet, she's thorough, and she doesn't lose," was all Keisha said. That was enough for Andre. The office was in a small professional building off the main road. Nothing flashy, just clean carpet, framed credentials on the wall, and a desk that meant business. Carol Sims was in her mid-50s, small-framed with natural hair going silver at the temples, and a way of listening that made you feel like every word you said was being filed somewhere useful. Andre sat across from her on a Tuesday afternoon with a manila envelope in his lap. "Walk me through it," she said. So he did. He laid it out the same way he ran his warehouse floor, in order, without gaps. The joint account, the transfers into Preston's consulting business, the rented apartment under Danielle's maiden name, the iCloud records showing 3 years of contact, the banking records from the business trip, Ruth's testimony, Preston's fraudulent pitch to Braddock's procurement board. Carol didn't interrupt. She made notes. When he finished, she set her pen down and looked at the documents he'd placed on her desk. "This is well documented," she said. "Unusually well." "I wanted to make sure it held up." She nodded. "It will." She pulled the bank statements closer and studied them for a moment. The consistent transfers into an account bearing a third party's name. That's financial misconduct. Potentially financial abuse, depending on how the court frames it. Combined with evidence that marital funds were used to support the affair and finance a fraudulent business venture, we can argue this aggressively. She looked up. "Your 401k is protected under separate property provisions if we document the contribution timeline correctly. Your inheritance, when did you receive it?" 4 years ago, before the transfers started. "And it's been held separately? Not commingled with joint accounts?" "Separate savings account. My name only. I never touched it for household expenses." Carol's expression stayed neutral, but she gave a small, satisfied nod. Then we protect it. If she's already consulted an attorney about going after it, she's going to be disappointed. She clicked her pen. Filing under seal means it stays out of public record until we're ready to serve. She won't see it coming. That's what I need, Andre said. How long do you need before it lands? Andre thought about Braddock. He thought about the compliance team's timeline. A week? Maybe 9 days. I can work with that. He met Keisha for dinner that same evening. A booth in the back of a restaurant they'd gone to since they were kids, red vinyl seats, the same overhead light that had always flickered slightly. Keisha had the folder open before her food arrived. Sims called me after your meeting, she said. She likes your case. Good. Andre. Keisha set her hand flat on the folder. I need you to hear me. Once you file, it's moving. There's no pause button. I know that. Do you? She studied his face. Because you've been holding this for weeks. You've been calm, you've been smart, you've been patient. All of that was right. But the moment that paper gets served, she stopped. It gets loud. You ready for loud? He looked at her across the table. I'm ready to be done, he said. That settled her. She picked up her fork. Okay, then here's the timing. Sims files Thursday morning. Braddock's compliance team is finishing their internal review. I talked to a contact over there. They're planning to formally notify their legal team by end of week. Friday, at the latest. She glanced up. You need to move before Danielle hears anything from any direction. She cannot get wind of this. She won't, Andre said. I'm going to ask her to dinner Friday night. Keisha went still. Dinner. Tell her I want to talk, that I've been thinking, that I want to work on us. He said it plainly, the same way he'd describe a routing plan. She'll believe it. She has no reason not to. Keisha was quiet for a long moment. He could see her turning it over, checking it for weak points, the way she always did. She'll walk in thinking she has the upper hand, she said finally. Yes. And you'll already have everything. Yes. Keisha picked up her glass. She didn't say anything else about it. He drove home that night on quiet roads. The city moved around him, headlights, storefronts, people on their way to whatever ordinary thing came next. He thought about the way Carol Sims had stacked those bank statements, the precise way she'd squared their edges against the desk. He thought about Braddock writing down that name without blinking. He thought about Keisha's folder, organized and airtight. 3 separate pieces, all of them moving, all of them timed. He turned onto his street, pulled into the driveway, and sat in the dark for a moment. Then he picked up his phone and typed a message to Danielle. Hey, was thinking we could do dinner Friday. Just the 2 of us. I'll make a reservation. Her reply came in under a minute. I'd like that. Andre set the phone on the passenger seat. Everything was in place. The restaurant was Danielle's pick. She'd chosen a place in Midtown. Soft lighting, linen napkins, the kind of spot she liked to post about on social media. Small candles on every table. A jazz trio in the corner playing something low and smooth. Andre had made the reservation she suggested without comment. He arrived first. He chose a table near the back, away from the music. He ordered water, straightened his silverware, and waited. She walked in at 7 on the dot. Danielle always knew how to enter a room. She wore a deep burgundy dress, and her hair was down, the way she knew he used to love it. She smiled when she spotted him, warm, a little careful, the smile of a woman who thought she was managing something. She leaned down and kissed his cheek before she sat. You look good, she said. Thank you. He kept his voice even. You too. A waiter came. They ordered. Danielle picked up her menu and talked about the salmon, asked if he'd been here before, said something light about the decor. She was loose, comfortable. She held her wine glass by the stem and tilted her head when she laughed at her own joke. She had no idea. That was the part that used to hurt. Now it was just a fact. He let her finish the small talk. He let her settle into the chair, into the candlelight, into the version of this evening she had already written in her head, the one where Andre was hurting, searching, ready to be guided back toward whatever she decided to offer him. He waited until the waiter walked away. Then he set his hands flat on the table and began. "I came home early on a Tuesday, about 5 weeks ago," he said. 2:15 in the afternoon. There was a gray Nissan Altima in the driveway. Preston Vaughn was in my house. He was comfortable. He'd been there before. The smile didn't fall off her face all at once. It shifted, just slightly, a small tightening around the eyes. "Andre, I didn't go inside," he continued. "I sat in my car for 10 minutes and watched. Then I drove away, and I started paying attention." He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and placed a single folded page on the table between them. He didn't push it toward her. He just let it sit. 14 months of transfers, he said. Joint account to a business account registered under Preston Vaughn's consulting company. Not your business. His funds I earned. He paused. I did the math. It's a little over $41,000. Her jaw tightened. She set down her wine glass. The iCloud account you forgot we shared. I went through it. 3 years, Danielle. Not 6 months. Not recently. 3 years, while I was running double shifts so your business could get on its feet. He said it without anger, just the way it was. The business that never had a single real client. That's not, she started. I talked to your mother. That stopped her. The color shifted in her face, not red, closer to gray. Ruth told me about the conversations you and Preston have been having. About the timeline, about the settlement. He held her gaze. My 401k, my father's inheritance. He said it quietly, the same way he'd say anything. That was the part where this stopped being about a marriage and started being something else. She had no right. Danielle's voice came out thin. And then there's Preston's consulting pitch. Andre folded his hands together. The logistics contract he tried to sell to my company, the one with very specific operational details, details that came from conversations we had at home, details that only one person could have passed along. Danielle was very still now. My regional director has had a compliance team on it for 2 weeks, Andre said. I didn't have to tell them much. The documents spoke for themselves. The candle between them flickered. The jazz trio moved into something slower. Danielle leaned forward. Andre, listen to me. Her voice shifted, softer, urgent, the voice she used when she needed something from him. Whatever you found, whatever my mother said, you don't have the full picture. Preston and I, it got complicated, but it was never supposed to. I'm not here to hear about Preston. I know I hurt you. Her eyes went glassy. She reached across the table toward his hand. I know I did, but we can fix this. We have 6 years. You don't throw away 6 years over. The divorce was filed Thursday morning, Andre said. Her hand stopped moving. Under seal. My 401k is protected. The inheritance is protected. The financial abuse documentation is already part of the filing. He straightened. Your attorney is going to find this case considerably harder than whatever you were planning. Danielle sat back. Whatever she'd prepared for, it wasn't this. It wasn't a man who had already finished the fight before it started. You've known, she said, barely above a whisper, this whole time. Yes. Andre lifted his hand to signal the waiter, placed enough cash on the table to cover the meal and the tip, and stood. He buttoned his jacket, Take care of yourself, Danielle." He walked away from the table without looking back. Behind him, he heard her exhale, sharp, fractured, the sound of something finally breaking. And then, faintly, the vibration of her phone against the linen. Her screen lit up with Preston's name. The news traveled fast. By 9 o'clock Saturday morning, Andre's phone had already buzzed twice, colleagues forwarding a notice that had gone out through Braddock's compliance office. The language was formal and dry, the kind of corporate writing that managed to say everything without saying anything dramatic. Formal termination of engagement, referral to legal counsel, vendor blacklisted pending investigation. Preston Vaughn's name was right there in the middle of it. Andre read it once, set his phone face down on the kitchen counter, and poured his coffee. He'd slept 8 hours for the first time in weeks. By noon, 3 things had happened in quick succession. First, Braddock's company submitted its formal complaint to the Regional Business Licensing Board, a step that would make Preston's name searchable in any background check, any future vendor review, any contract negotiation in the metro area for the foreseeable future. The freight and logistics community was not large. People talked. A name attached to a fraud filing didn't recover easily from that. Second, Keisha called. "The court accepted the filing," she said, skipping hello entirely. "Financial abuse documentation is in." Her attorney already requested the 401k disclosure and got stopped cold. There was a pause, and Andre could hear the quiet satisfaction in her voice, the kind a paralegal earns after days of careful, detailed work. "They're going to push back, but they've got nothing to push with. You documented everything." "Good," Andre said. "You doing okay?" "Yeah." He meant it. Third, Ruth Okafor drove to Danielle's apartment. Andre didn't know what was said in that room. He didn't need to. He heard about it later, secondhand, from Keisha, who heard it from a cousin. Ruth had arrived with a casserole dish and left 30 minutes later without it, her face tight, her phone already to her ear before she reached the parking lot. What she'd learned, the full scope of the settlement plan, the way Danielle had weaponized Andre's earnings, the calculated coldness of targeting his father's inheritance, had apparently been more than Ruth could hold. She had not gone back. Whatever guilt Ruth had been carrying for months, it had finally collapsed under the weight of knowing the whole truth. The woman who had known Andre since he was 26 years old, who had eaten at his table and called him son at every holiday for 6 years, that woman was done covering for her daughter. Danielle was alone in that apartment before the day was over. Preston didn't last the weekend. He called her Saturday afternoon. She found out what he'd done, that she'd done, only because she'd pushed him for answers after Andre walked out of that restaurant the night before. And what Preston said, apparently, was very little. He was brief in the way that men are brief when the numbers no longer add up in their favor. There would be no settlement, no payout, no cushion. Just a divorce that had already been filed on Andre's terms, with documentation that painted a picture Danielle's own attorney wasn't eager to contest, and now Preston's name was attached to a fraud complaint that would follow him everywhere he tried to do business. He had nothing to gain by staying. So he left. No fight, no dramatic goodbye. Just a phone call and then silence, the way smoke disappears when there's no more fire underneath it. Danielle was left with an empty apartment, a legal battle she was poorly positioned to win, a mother who wouldn't pick up the phone, and the particular kind of loneliness that comes from a life built on a lie finally running out of room to stand. Andre spent most of Saturday doing ordinary things. He went to the hardware store. He picked up a new kitchen faucet he'd been meaning to replace for 2 months. He drove with the windows down and the radio playing something low, and he didn't think about Danielle, and he didn't think about Preston, and he didn't think about any of it the way he used to, with that dull, grinding weight in his chest that had been sitting there for 5 weeks. It was gone. That was the thing that surprised him most. Not the relief. He'd expected that. But how clean the absence of it felt. Like setting down something heavy he hadn't realized he was still holding. He got home a little after 5, made dinner, ate it at the table which he rarely used anymore. Watched 30 minutes of a game he didn't care much about. At 7:48 his phone lit up on the couch cushion beside him. Danielle. He looked at it. He watched the screen until it stopped. At 7:51. Again. At 8:03, 8:17, 8:34. Each time the phone lit up and buzzed against the cushion, and then went quiet. Each time Andre looked at the screen long enough to see the name, and then looked back at whatever was in front of him. He didn't block the calls. He didn't silence the phone. He just let them come and let them pass, the way you let weather pass, without arguing with it, without inviting it inside, just watching it from somewhere warm and dry until it moved on. The attorney's office was on the 4th floor of a building downtown that smelled like carpet cleaner and recycled air, the kind of place where serious things got done quietly, without any drama. A waiting room with gray chairs, a receptionist who didn't look up from her screen, a conference table long enough for 6 people, even though only 4 were present. Andre arrived first. He always did. He sat on his side of the table with his hands folded in front of him and watched the door. His attorney, a sharp woman named Patricia Osei, sat beside him, her folder already open, her pen already uncapped. They had spoken for 10 minutes in the hallway before coming in. There wasn't much left to say. The heavy work was already done. Danielle arrived 7 minutes late. She came in with her own attorney, a man Andre didn't recognize, who wore an expression that said he already knew how the morning was going to go. Danielle sat down across from Andre, and for a moment neither of them spoke. She looked tired. Not the kind of tired that one bad night causes, the kind that accumulates slowly over weeks of poor decisions finally coming due all at once. Her hair was neat. Her clothes were put together. But her eyes were different. The brightness she used to carry, the one that made her seem like she was always 3 steps ahead of a joke only she knew, that was gone. Andre looked at her steadily and said nothing. Patricia slid the final documents to the center of the table. Danielle's attorney leaned over and spoke to her quietly. She nodded once, twice. Then she looked up across the table, past Patricia, and fixed her gaze on Andre. "I just want to say something," she said. Her voice was calm, controlled. Andre recognized the effort it was taking her to keep it that way. "Okay," he said. "I know how this looks." She paused. "I know what the paperwork says about me. I'm not here to fight that." Another pause. "But 6 years is 6 years, Andre. And I think you could find some room, somewhere in all of this, to let me walk away with a little more dignity than what's on that table." She let the words sit there. At a different point in his life, that appeal would have worked. He knew it. She knew it. The old Andre, the one who worked 70 hours a month because he believed that providing was the same thing as being loved, that man would have softened right there, would have told himself that grace was the bigger move, that taking less was the same as being the better person. He wasn't that man anymore. "I'm going to tell you something," Andre said. He kept his voice even and quiet. "Braddock promoted me. It came through last week. The regional operations director position. The one that's been open for 2 years. He let that land. The one Preston tried to take off the board by pitching stolen information to the company that was supposed to fill it. Danielle's jaw tightened slightly. "I didn't come here to make you feel small," he said, "but you asked for more dignity than what's on that table. That table reflects what you built, Danielle, not what I took from you. What you built, with your choices, over 3 years." He looked at her without anger, without satisfaction, without anything theatrical. Just clear eyes and a steady voice. "I'm not carrying any of that for you anymore." Danielle looked down at the table. She didn't respond. There was nothing left to respond with. Andre picked up the pen. He signed where Patricia indicated. Once, twice, a third time on the final page. Each signature was clean and deliberate, the same way he did everything, like a man who had already decided what he was doing long before he walked into the room. He capped the pen and set it down. "I genuinely wish you well," he said. He meant part of it. Then he stood, buttoned his jacket, and walked out. 1 year later, the warehouse floor was loud the way it always was at 6 a.m. Forklifts backing up, radios crackling, the heavy, mechanical rhythm of freight moving through its channels the way it was supposed to. Andre stood near the shipping bay with a clipboard, and a young man named Darius beside him, 22 years old, 2 weeks on the job, the kind of focused quiet that reminded Andre of himself at that age. "You see this manifest?" Andre said, holding it out. Darius looked it over. He frowned. "That count doesn't match." "No, it doesn't." Andre nodded. "Most guys would have moved it anyway. You want to know why you shouldn't?" Darius looked up. "Because a mistake that small," Andre said, "is how something big goes wrong later." Darius wrote a note. Andre watched him do it. Down the corridor, through the glass wall of the regional director's office, his office now, morning light came through the blinds in long, even lines across the desk where a new folder was already waiting. New routes, new contracts, new problems to solve. He had built something worth returning to. That was enough. Across town, in an apartment with a parking lot that never quite filled up, Danielle sat alone at a kitchen table with her phone face up and the screen dark. There were no calls coming in. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.